Alright guys, we're going to start part 1 of our review for quiz 6.1 to 6.3. Part 1's basically about, is this a function? Yes or no, and then find the domain and range, right? So for problems 1 through 3, the directions are determine whether each of the following is a relation or a function, and then beneath that it says, if it is a function, find its domain and range. Okay, so we're going to start with problem number 1. So first off, is it a function? For graphs, remember we use something called the vertical line test. Meaning if I draw vertical lines all through the red graph, as long as the blue line only touches it one time as it goes through, so one time. Okay, cool. It's a function. So since it is a function, I'm going to get rid of this. I'm going to go ahead and circle. Yes, it is a function. Great. Now I'm going to find the domain and range. So domain, I'll just do kind of in like a yellow highlight, I guess. So domain, remember we talk about, actually I'm going to do it in green. So domain we talk about are x values. Okay, x values. So we're looking at how wide the graph is. We're looking at this x-axis and where does our graph start on that x-axis? Where does it end on that x-axis? So I'm looking at my red graph. I'm looking at the widest pieces of the graph. The widest pieces are these two arrows. Okay, so what I'm going to do is figure out what's the coordinate for that arrow. So we're going to start with the left one. The left arrow, it's obviously going towards the left. So for an x value, since it's not like definitive, there's not a dot, it's an arrow. It's continuously going to the left. That means it's going towards negative infinity. We also notice that the arrow is pointing down. So down for the y value also means negative infinity because it's going down forever and ever and ever and ever, just like it's going left forever and ever and ever and ever. Okay, so my domain is going to start here at negative infinity. Then on the right side, the right arrow, its coordinate, we'll take a look at that. It's going to the right forever and ever and ever. So on the x-axis, it's going in a positive direction, which means it's going towards positive infinity. For the y value, it's going down forever and ever and ever, so that means it's going towards negative infinity. But for domain, we care about x. So I have two values now for my domain. I know that this graph starts at negative infinity and it ends at positive infinity for the x values. Range deals with y values. Okay, so if we're looking at the range, that means I'm, dealing with the y-axis here. So what I want to do is I want to find the tallest point of my graph, which is here. And if I look at the coordinate of that point, I notice my x value, it's in line with this tick mark down here. So that's one tick mark, so that'd be 1. Along the y-axis, I have 2 spaces, 2 tick marks that are in line with that. So it'd be 1, 2. Okay, so my y value for this coordinate point is 2. So there's our tallest point of our graph. Now we're going to look at our shortest or our lowest points in our graph. Our lowest points are going to be our arrows, okay, because it's the bottom of the graph. So this is also going to be a low point. This is going to be a low point. Look at their y values. We already found them. We don't have to find them again. Both of their y values are negative infinity. So if when we write out our range, which deals with y values, I know that just looked really funny. Okay, we look at our y values. I go from the tallest part, which is here, to the lowest or the shortest part. Okay, that's my range. I always start with the smallest number though, and the smallest number is going to be negative infinity. The biggest number here is 2. So there's my domain and range. For problem 2, I don't have a graph. I just have two sets. We can consider this our x values. This can be our y values. Great. It starts at x. It goes to y. I know that for it to be a function, I can't have one x value that goes to two y values. Like negative 1/2 can't go to 1 and 2. It only can go to one of those things. So if I look at these, negative 1/2 has one y value, 7 has one y value, 0 has one y value. So for everything that's connected, I have one x going to one y. So yes, it is a function. I know that these two guys right here, they're not going anywhere. That's fine. Doesn't really matter. The domain for this is just going to be your x values. Okay? So we're going to just put this in a set. So a little fancy bracket. And we just put everything in order. So negative 1/2, 0, 4, 7, and 8. Our ranges are y values. Again, we're going to have a fancy little bracket. And we're just going to put everything in order. 1, 2, 3. Alright. So this next piece, I have a set of ordered pairs. Okay, remember ordered pairs? They always are in the format of x comma y, x comma y, x comma y, x comma y. And if it helps, you can just list out your x values. Like, I see my x is a 4, 18, negative 3, 4. Those are my x values. Then the y values are 1, negative 3, 7, and 2. Okay, and if we draw our arrows, it might be a little easier for us to see. So we have 4 and 1 are together, 18 and negative 3 are together. That's a negative 8, not a negative 3. Goodness. Anyway, these two are together, and these two are together. So it looks like every x has one y, but what you have to realize is, hey, this 4 is the same. So 4 in this case is going to 1 and to 2. And because that happens, this is not a function. No function, so we're not going to bother with finding domain and range. Let's go ahead and move on. For these 4 problems, it says find the domain and range of the function. Notice it doesn't say, or it just says of the following. Notice it does not say find the domain and range if it's a function. So regardless of whether or not these graphs pass the vertical line test, we're just trying to find their domain and range. Don't care about anything else. So let's go ahead and start off with problem 1. Let's get the domain. Remember, domain deals with your x values. How wide is your graph? Okay, so if I'm looking at the x-axis, I notice that my graph starts at this weird dot and ends at these arrows. So that's as wide as my graph gets. Let's start with the dot. If I look, I'm just going to, undo that. I'm just going to draw my dot so we know where it is. If I look at the tick marks tell me where this dot is. On the x-axis, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to the right, so negative 5. On the y-axis, it's 1, 2, so negative 2. That's the coordinate for that dot, and I care about the x value for that domain. For my arrows, this arrow up top is going to the right. Okay, it's going to the right, so I know it's going towards positive infinity. It's also going up, so again, towards positive infinity. This arrow down here is going to the right, so positive infinity. It's going down though, so that's towards negative infinity. But remember, for domain, all I care about is the x values. That's all I care about. So for my domain, for this graph, it's going to start at that dot at -5, and it ends at the arrows. Both arrows are going to the right, so both arrows are going towards positive infinity for their x value. Then our range starts at the lowest point, goes to the highest point, or you can start highest and go to lowest. It doesn't matter as long as you understand what you're looking at. I'm looking at the tallest part of my graph, which is this arrow. The lowest part of my graph is this arrow. And then what are their y values? Well, this is negative infinity, that's positive infinity. Boom, we have our range. We're going from the lowest, so negative infinity, to the highest, positive infinity. And maybe you're wondering, well, what happened to this point? Why didn't I use any of this? Why didn't I use the -2? Well, that's because that dot, if we're talking about range, we're talking about the tallest and the lowest part of our graphs, that dot falls right in the middle. So it really means nothing to me when I'm talking about range. For problem number 2, we have a parabola very similar to the first problem on the first page. This parabola has a point up at the top, and it has arrows at the bottom. I'm just going to go ahead and write down the coordinates. The coordinate of this point is at 2, 3. The coordinate for this left arrow, it's going to the left, so towards negative infinity, and it's going down again towards negative infinity. This arrow is going to the right, so for an x value towards positive infinity. For a y value, it's going down, so towards negative infinity. Okay, so now I have all my coordinates. I'm just going to focus on domain and range. So domain we'll put in yellow. Undo. So my domain is going to go from negative infinity to positive infinity. Oops. My range is going to go from my highest point, which is 3, and my lowest points, which are the arrows, both at negative infinity. So my range will be from negative infinity to positive 3. Remember, we go smallest number to largest number. All right, on to number 3. We'll start with domain, just like always. I'm looking at the widest parts of my graph. So the farthest point to the left, the farthest point to the right. That's the arrows in both cases. This arrow is going to the left. This arrow is going to the left, so it's going towards negative infinity. It's going up, so it's going towards positive infinity. This arrow down here is going to the right, so towards positive infinity. It's going down, So that's towards negative infinity. So those are the coordinates that I'm going to work with. Again, domain, we'll put domain in yellow again. Domain, I care about the x values. Okay, so my domain is going to go from negative infinity to positive infinity. My range is going to deal with the y values. So again, from negative infinity to positive infinity. And then problem number 4, same deal, guys. I just got a squiggly line with some arrows. The arrows are both the widest parts, and they're the tallest and shortest parts, or lowest parts. So these two arrows are my focus. This arrow is going to the left, so negative infinity. Going down, again, negative infinity. This arrow is going to the right, so positive infinity, and it's going up, so positive infinity. So again, my domain and my range are both going to be the same. Domain, again, deals with your x values, so from negative infinity to positive infinity. Range is your y values, but they're the same, so negative infinity to positive infinity. Okay? So this is part 1 of your review for quiz 6.1 to 6.3. You can get started on that assignment, and then after that, after I grade it, you can start review part 2.